Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. This is episode 131. My name is Kieren Lefevre, and I am joined by my coach, my mentor, my friend, Adam Charles.
Yeah, pushing it. What's up, Kieren?
Associate.
Acquaintance is
Acquaintance,
probably more
right.
better fitted.
Yeah,
Yeah. Especially after I think I've run out of digits on my hands to count the amount of bad news you gave me this morning.
I gave you a lot of bad news.
I know. It's 9:30 in the morning here.
Unfortunately, this may be a teaser because we cannot release this bad news yet, but it will come out. You'll be very aware of this news. It might be good news for you.
Wait, which bad news are we?
Fucking any of them, bro. Any of them. But yeah. So it's not confirmed, but it's, yeah.
I mean, I can at least mention why I'm upset. The one you spoke to me while we were getting coffee.
No.
Not the reason why, but that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can. Yes.
So so people, what is the bad news? I'll give you the one that I'm upset about the most, selfishly. Like I said to Kieren, well, on your list of priorities, pretty low, but it was really high on my list of priorities. So I'm furious.
It was pretty high on mine.
So episode 129, we had the Matt and George, the organizers of Subversion, on the podcast, which is, one of Australia's premium, or really the main sort of super fight.
Yeah, I'd say the number one in Australia.
Organization. Yeah. I mean, they got one coming up. It's March 18th, and the headliners are Jeremy Skinner and Ash Williams, both of Jeremy being the Oceania Trials winner for ADCC, Ash Williams being the UK winner. They're headlining it. So, okay, it's not who's number one, but by Australia standards, it's good. It streams on Flow Grappling and everything. Anyway, we had them on the podcast, and if you didn't listen to it, there was a bit of conversation about them not having a second commentator. They have this guy, Sonny Brown. He also has a podcast, Sonny Brown Breakdown, and he's the main commentator for Subversion. Anyway, that was just generic conversation. And then that podcast led to them reaching out to me afterwards and being like, hey, Adam, would like to invite you to be the second commentator.
Good call.
And I was like, yeah, cool, awesome. I've never been a commentator before, and I at least know what half guard is, so I think I'll do an okay. I think I'll do an okay job.
Just standard old half guard.
Yeah.
All these fancy half guards these days.
Yeah, whoa. Just
octopus
knee
guard.
shield. Don't know what you're talking about. And so I'm going to be one of the commentators, which is quite funny. I'm already getting a lot of just from my friends being like, you're selling out, because now, I've ripped on Flow Grappling a lot, and now Subversion streams on Flow Grappling.
So now you are employed by Flow Grappling.
not really, but
No.
No.
Shh. Also,
do you have to be getting paid for it to be employed? Because by that definition, I am not employed.
But I will say, you have slowly but surely over time become everything that you hate.
I have. What was the other thing I became that I? Oh yeah. Okay. So
we're jumping around a bit.
We're jumping
the story
around
and then we'll circle back.
So anyway, I'm going to be commentating, which I'm actually quite excited for. International listeners, if you want to watch it, if you want to look at me fail at commentating.
Oh, you're going to be fucking awesome, man.
Trying to remember all the weird Japanese names for leg entanglements and that, which is quite funny, because even sometimes when I teach well-known positions, me coming from learning not everything I learned, but the vast majority of my career happening in Brazil, there wasn't cutting armbar, shotgun armbar, belly down armbar.
Shotgun armbar once.
Yeah,
what the fuck's that?
Because
you asshole.
Yeah, because they were all just called arm lock.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
even knee bar, toe hold. They were all just called leg lock. There was all very sort of generic terms for everything. So even some of them, the more obvious ones, had names like your scissor sweep, was just translated to Portuguese, scissor sweep, right? But a lot of them were just, you didn't have names. So even generic positions, let alone all the Japanese words that people now say.
Shinigashi, Ashigarami.
And it was like, well, wasn't that called single leg X for years? Yeah. Wasn't that called an arm triangle for years? Why are we now adding all these words?
But hey,
in?
You know them.
I know them. I just don't necessarily know the Japanese name for them. So I have to brush up on that a little bit. But I'm actually a bit excited because for me, there's kind of no pressure. I mean, I'm not going into it thinking, oh, this is my chance. I'm looking for a career change to become a commentator, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, I mean, my only interaction really with Matt and George, the organizers of Subversion, is from when I fought on Subversion and having them on the podcast. That's it, my interaction with them. So, and the biggest chunk of that time was on the podcast. So I'm just going to be like I am on the podcast.
I think you're fine, yeah.
Like I'll be watching it and I'm going to be like, oh, bro, I would have never tapped to that or whatever. And look, if people like me, cool. Maybe they ask me back. If people don't like me, then hey, it's an experience and it's just something I've done once. So I feel no sort of pressure about the whole thing. And I've met Sonny, the other commentator, multiple times. So
I met him once at Craig Jones' seminar.
Yeah, so I mean, I even fought him once. The first time I met him, I fought him. It was quite a funny story, actually. So when Sonny and I fought, he was my first match. I mean, in Australia, these local competitions, there's not usually many black belts. So it was me, Sonny, and this other guy, James. So only the three of us in the division. So I had Sonny first, and yeah, however it played out, took him down, like was taking his back and decided to go for a calf slicer stupidly. And I tore my own LCL, like my knee.
Is this who that? Oh, because you truck rolled him.
Yeah, I truck rolled him and went for a calf slicer. Had the calf slicer, but if my opinion has since changed on calf slicers to them being essentially Russian roulette, like the dumb submission. And I know that Craig Jones feels the same about this. He addressed it in the seminar we went to. Yeah,
he did.
Talking about how they're just a stupid submission because it's kind of just a game of whose ligaments are stronger. Right. And evidently not mine.
Yeah.
And so my knee popped massively and which turned it was, I think it was a grade 2 LCL. Like I was out for a couple of months.
Did you stop there and then or did you finish the fight?
No. So I let go of the calf slicer because my knee exploded.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember. I think I took his back and bow and arrow or something like that. I can't remember, but submitted him.
So at least you finished it.
Yeah,
like
well,
a true warrior.
Yeah, well, not only did I finish it, I then did the next fight against the other guy.
Jesus.
And I was like, I can't remember, but whatever my original game plan was, I was like, well, I can't really do that because my knees sore or whatever it was. And I took his back like instantly. And then the second I put my hook in, I was like, oh, no, that ain't happening because of my knee.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I ended up submitting him as well, but it took me a while because I kind of only had one leg. And then, so when we were like at the podium waiting for our medals, because again, it was only the three of us, so we all default got medals anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm talking to Sonny and he's like, bro, and it's the first time I met him, right? And he goes, he's like, in our match, he's like, did you hear a really loud pop? And I go, yeah, bro, that was my knee. And he's like, oh, thank God, I thought it was mine. and I'm like, nah, dude, my knee.
What a legend.
I was like, my knee exploded. He's like, and he's standing there with his wife or girlfriend or whatever. And he was like, oh man, I was so worried that I like blew out my knee and I didn't feel it. And I was like, nah, you're good, bro. That was me.
That is so funny.
And I've met him a couple of times since. He's when I fought on Subversion, he was the commentator and at the seminar that you met him as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it'll be Sonny and I. This is we haven't even gotten to the bad news yet. So Kieren thought he dodged that. So when this came about, Kieren was like, if for anyone who didn't listen to the episode, Subversion previously, you could kind of, if it was an interesting enough matchup, you could make the card. But as they've grown, they've kind of had to put a line somewhere. Yeah. And they've gone, okay, so from now, to be invited on, you have to be purple belt and above is kind of where they put the line. Lower than that, blue belt, essentially. They don't put white belt matches on it. But for blue belts, you've got to win the qualifiers, which happen the week beforehand. And if you make it to essentially the final of the qualifiers, that then takes place on the main card, or on the prelims of the actual event. So once I got invited to be the commentator because of the podcast, essentially, Kieren was like, oh man, well, like he's like, I've got to go win the qualifiers now. I've got to make it onto the card. Yeah. So like we're both essentially gone from having the Subversion guys on the podcast to both of us being on the card in little air quotes, like you fighting, me commentating, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, hell yeah, man. And anyway, so we're working towards the qualifiers, which take place on March 11th.
We've been working at it.
Yeah.
We've got a strategy, a game plan. I've been fixing the holes in my game, which to be fair, the last, 3 or 4 weeks, I even did that comp recently? I don't.
Yeah, you did
we didn't
the
even
comp.
talk about the comp of the podcast yet. I don't think we may have.
Well, we answered it in the Q&A where someone asked,
the greatest
like,
moment. We did. Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry.
Kieren got triple gold, right?
Yeah.
Only not quad gold because he got stuck in traffic and missed his first division.
Yeah.
So he was signed up for all four:
Yeah.
gi, weight, and open weight.
Yep.
No gi, weight, and open weight, but missed his gi weight division. But won gi absolute, no gi weight division, and no gi absolute.
Yeah. So I even did that in preparation for it. We looked at that. I'm fixing holes in my game. I've even like got a new skill set that I haven't really explored that I think is almost more effective than my previous passing style. I think it's going to be more effective.
Well, now you can throw it out the window, Kieren, because this morning he was like, oh man, something came up and I'm not available on March 11th or the 18th. Well, actually, he's available March the 11th, but not March the 18th, which is the actual day.
So I can't.
And part of doing the qualifiers is you have to be available.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just do the qualifiers to win it and then not do the actual event.
Because then I just destroy the opportunity for everyone else that's
there.
You know
it'd be a bit of a dog move.
Yeah,
so anyway, this morning Kieran's like,
nervous.
oh, I'm not available for it. And I was like,
I can say why. The reason I'm not available is I'm going to be out of the country.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say right now.
And I was like, well, fucking, what do I have to do to get you on a no-flight list?
Yeah, they're a thing. Hey, I saw this meme of this dude who broke up with his girlfriend in the air on a plane.
Oh, yeah, I've seen some of those, and I'm like, why?
Exactly.
Why
I don't know. Would you do that?
Actually, I can tell you why. I think of a very logical reason why. The same reason that people like break up with people like at a restaurant or something.
So they don't make a scene?
Well, yeah, because the logic is if I do it in a public place, they won't make a scene, rather than if you break up with them at home. And
he obviously didn't know his bloody ex-girlfriend, mate, because this bitch made a scene. It was crazy. Like, she is screaming and hollering and like, at least I think that's what happened. If it's not, I'll feel bad. If it's something else dramatic happened in her life, I'll feel bad. But now she's automatically on no-fly list.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, if you create a scene like that in the air and they have to like try and restrain you, you get banned from that airline. And then all the associate airlines.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they have a universal, blacklist, but they might. It's pretty crazy.
You got any domestic flights planned between now and that we could cause a scene on?
You can slip something in my luggage, a loaded handgun or something. How did that get in there? Then you have to get your hands on it. Yeah, I mean, you could rig it, but I mean, by the time I get on the plane, I would have missed the qualifier.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the bad news we can share. 13 minute shit talking before we got into the episode.
Fucking
so
awesome.
That's back to our old ways.
Yeah.
Man, that's what people.
But I do have to say, just to drag this out a little bit longer, but people probably enjoy it.
We're going for 15, all right.
New record. Now, our personal record is like 30 minutes in and we scrapped the episode,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It wasn't that long ago either.
No, it was great. That was fantastic. Oh, shit. Okay, so over time, since you started this podcast, you had some very strong stances on some prominent jiu-jitsu people. However, I'll explain. However, over time, slowly but surely, you have turned into a replica of those who you hate. You have become the monster that you hate. No. And I will explain why. Let me explain why.
No. Firstly, he is how dare you say that like strong senses on jiu-jitsu. I don't consider this person a jiu-jitsu person. Just because someone has a black belt doesn't.
You're a jiu-jitsu person. If you have a black belt, you are a jiu-jitsu person.
No.
Yeah.
No.
What?
Bro, I can boil an egg and I'm not a chef, all right? Like, fuck. Like, wait, I mean, it's harder to get a black belt than boil an egg. All these white belts like, wait, what? I can do that.
Oh, my God.
No, for me, like, if I were to say, where's the line as someone to say this person is a jiu-jitsu person? Like, I mean, I guess I'm saying, is jiu-jitsu their career? Like, I mean, like that's what I mean.
I would argue it is.
Like, you could be a chef or a cook, or to stay with that sort of analogy, you could be a chef or a cook or whatever, but like, if you just cook recreationally, like, I mean, it's not your career. You're not working in a kitchen, whatever. Like,
But are you a food person?
Yes.
Got him. We got him. So the person we're talking about is Joe Rogan.
He's come a long way since COVID.
Don't backpedal this, you bastard.
Since the world has gone into a less controversial stance on some very
controversial topics,
life-saving topics, and do's and don'ts about
How? Let me explain how, though. We need to fill the audience in because you and I both know, but the audience is confused and probably mad. So, in the early days of this podcast, Adam had a very strong negative stance toward our Lord and Savior, Joe Rogan.
I mean, I still do.
You still kind of do.
He's still quite.
However, I will point out that over time, in the evolution of this podcast, you have become more and more similar to Joe Rogan by the day. You have. And this is how. It all started with a message that we received on our Instagram from an individual that somehow stumbled
Tell
upon.
me to read the actual message. I can read
we
it.
We can, but let me build it up. Okay. Somehow, this individual stumbled upon this podcast with no prior jiu-jitsu experience, and due to the direct result of loving this podcast, has decided to start training jiu-jitsu. Exactly how thousands upon thousands of others in the jiu-jitsu community have started through listening to our Lord and Savior, Joe Rogan.
Stop saying Lord and Savior.
You have now become the Joe Rogan that you hate. And further to that, you are now a commentator on fight sports. So not only are you both commentators, you're both influencing people through your podcast to start jiu-jitsu. You are Joe Rogan. You are Joe Rogan.
Is this a bad time to tell you I'm about to start taking TRT?
Taking TRT.
And watch this spinning back kick.
Wouldn't be surprised if you start bow hunting as well. You are a Joe Rogan clone.
Shit. Yeah, we got yeah. I mean, all jokes aside, this was a really cool message. I mean, we got this message from this guy, Zach, and he just wrote, "Don't even know how this came about, but I've been listening to you guys for the last 3 weeks. I didn't even train prior, so no clue how this started. Had my trial class Friday, tons of fun, signed up that day. So cheers, guys."
That is awesome.
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I would argue it's even more awesome than Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan started with, him talking to his mates, and it was, his platform was off comedy/MMA, very well known for commentating UFC. So if you clicked on a Joe Rogan podcast in the early days anyway, at least, it was some connection to combat sports. But nowadays, if we're talking, this message from Zach was only a week ago. Yeah. So if you were to click on a Joe Rogan podcast episode today, you might not, I'm sure that, he has so many listeners and followers, downloads. There would be thousands of people that click on a Joe Rogan podcast or listen to him and wouldn't even know that he's a UFC commentator. There would be people who click on it, don't even know he does jiu-jitsu, is a comedian, whatever, because they would click on it because he's got fucking Neil deGrasse Tyson on there, or he's got Kanye West, whoever, right? Yep. But our podcast is called the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. Like, how did you even get onto listening to it? Like, I don't know. That is a good question. That is an awesome origin story. That is just how I'm going to, I'm nothing like Joe Rogan. He's not even he's not even operating on my level, bro. Let's get on my level, Joe.
You're both black belts, right?
Yes.
You both have a podcast.
We both think we're funny, but not.
You're both funny. See, that backfired because that was funny. Yep, you're both funny, and you're both commentators.
Well, there's March 18th. I could get the boot before then.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Only you could get fired between now and March 18th.
Yeah.
But so I think that you have slowly but surely become the one that you hate. So if you hate on Joe Rogan, you're hating on yourself. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to end it that. I'm going to end it with that. Is you can no longer talk shit about Joe Rogan in my presence because you're just talking shit about yourself.
And you're like, and I don't want to see you do that to yourself, bro.
Yeah. So
you deserve more than that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dump on some other people then.
Sounds good.
Almost. If we eat that out 10 more minutes, the whole episode could have been a write-off. But
I was thinking that we're leading in that direction. If we had another topic to carry us to 30, that episode's a write-off.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what would it be labeled like? The bad news rant.
It could be. I was thinking about that in my head, like because I'm constantly editing and like thinking of tags and stuff like that. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, there was other bad news, but now I've forgotten about it. I'm devastated with the Joe Rogan comparison.
Well, it's an accurate comparison.
All right, so let's talk about
the topic of the day:
ecological teaching. I hear you.
What is it?
I hear you going, huh? What? Planting trees and stuff? No.
Fuck the environment. Someone just deleted this fucking episode.
Yeah, so let's talk about ecological training now that we're 20 minutes in, or teaching rather. It is something that has gained a little bit of traction, if you will, and I think maybe you might be able to just describe it better, but I'm just going to read the actual definition of ecological training. It's essentially a philosophy of training. I keep saying training, ecological teaching. It's essentially a thought of teaching that is used opposed to teaching regimented, like very strict sequences or steps, or in this case applied to jiu-jitsu techniques. It's where things are taught through a more immersive environment. So the teachings are presented in how they actually appear in the real world, right? So for sports, this is essentially akin to teaching through games and how things actually appear in a role and how they actually happen in live sparring in real matches rather than just repping techniques, right? This is the approach to ecological teaching. There's a guy called Rob Gray, an author, who has written a book that is called the How We Learn to Move. And Rob Gray is like a PhD in whatever. something. But I'll just read you the synopsis of the book so people know, because Rob Gray—
This is where it's coming from.
This is where it's coming from. And because he's taken this approach to sports, and there's, in the jiu-jitsu community, there's people who have essentially read Rob Gray's book more or less and been like, let's do that.
Yeah.
So it says, what is the new revolutionary way people are becoming skillful? How is sports practice and coaching becoming more creative and fun, giving athletes the opportunity to explore and support their own individuality and creativity? Why is it time we move away from the idea that we learn through boring repetition of a skill in an ungame-like practice environment, running through tires, hitting off tees, and dribbling through cones? A look at the exciting alternative approach to how we learn to move and its implications for practice, design, coaching, keeping kids engaged in sports, injury prevention, developing training technology using analytics, and more. So reading—
like a snooze fest.
Yeah. I also had to say, reading that sounds all well and good.
It sounds boring. No, I'm kidding.
However, we're here to dump on that a little bit. So
you are. You don't know my stance.
Well, fuck you, Kieren. Go boil an egg.
Yeah, fuck. All right, get a black belt.
So let me start off by saying, in my opinion, ecological teaching, however you want to label it, is something we already do in jiu-jitsu, and it's just a fancy way of explaining specific training. Right, is exactly what we do.
Yeah, I
but
agree.
There's some jiu-jitsu teachers, instructors who have taken this like really firm stance that is just flat out. They literally say the words, "I don't teach any techniques in my gym, in my class."
I heard these words. Yep.
Yeah, I don't teach any techniques. I just take an ecological teaching approach, and we teach through games and stuff like that. And it's absolute fucking dog shit, bro. Like, it's just— I'm straight up saying it is ridiculous.
To do it in isolation, you're saying?
To do it in isolation.
Just to clarify.
Yeah. No, sorry. So ecological teaching is fine.
Yep.
But like, we're just renaming something. It's just— imagine if I said to you, I don't teach any techniques in my class, in my gym, ever. We never do any techniques. We just do exclusively specific training.
I'm going to Gracie Barra.
Right. That's essentially what these people are saying. I don't teach techniques. I just teach this ecological teaching.
It's all through games and positions and
And there's nothing wrong with that in conjunction with regular teaching. Like I said, it's specific training. We already do it. Most gyms have been doing it for years. I feel like these people who are taking a strong stance on it, more marketing people just trying to, reinvent the wheel and, thinking that they've developed something that that they've found some new way to do something that is unique and better. Like, I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Like, one of the things that all these people say is they say, well, when I show someone a technique, they then just try to copy the way I do it, and it's never how it actually happens in a role. So if we teach through these games, I'll give you an example of a game. So they won't teach a half guard pass. They'll go, you're going to start in half guard. And
they don't even name the positions. They say, you're going to start in this, but sorry, go on.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they don't even name the positions. I'm not sure, but they go, for argument's sake, so everyone knows what we're talking about, they'll start in half guard and they'll go, the game is you need to get your knee out and either get it to the mat on this side of their hips, essentially the mount side.
Yep.
So you would end up in like
a smash, like a leg drag.
No. So you would end up in like a three-quarter mount.
Yep.
Or your knee to this side of the mat where you would end up in a knee cut-ish position. Right. And the idea is that, through games like this, they're learning like the fundamental mechanics and the concepts of how it works. I don't teach triangle chokes. I teach, the mechanics of how the choke works. So then when the buggy choke came along, all my students instantly knew how it worked and blah, 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 because it's just a double strangulation, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, bro, you're making it sound like you're the first dude who's thought about teaching their students like the concepts and mechanics of positions and techniques. It's fucking ridiculous, bro. I've seen students who I have given the most simple instruction, like do this step 1, step 2, step 3. That's fucking it. And they can't do it. So you think that putting them in an environment where they can figure it out on their own?
Yeah.
Like there are lots of positives to this approach. Like I said, I do ecological teaching in my gym. It's specific training, right? So again, I'm not dumping on ecological teaching. I'm dumping on only doing ecological teaching. And these people who are trying to reinvent the wheel, and just their marketing people just trying to as if they've thought of something that we're not already doing.
It's like throwing the baby out with the bath.
I've never heard Kieren use that one before. I give Kieren shit for using that expression all the time.
Yeah.
But if we're arguing traditional teaching, which includes ecological teaching, if we're arguing for if the argument, like these people who are currently doing the rounds promoting it, if we're arguing against traditional teaching, which again includes ecological teaching, if we're arguing traditional teaching versus only doing it, that's the current argument. There's way more cons to just doing ecological teaching than pros.
Because you're excluding
like 80% of the other ways that you can teach.
Whereas
jiu-jitsu.
if you do traditional teaching, that includes concepts of ecological practice, then you're getting the best of both worlds.
That's right. And, obviously this is not an open discussion as in our listeners live can be sending back. I would love to sit with someone and have them say but what about this? And because for every positive you've got for ecological as a sole teaching method, I can give you 10 negatives, right?
Well, how does John Danaher teach? Because internationally he's recognized as one of the best coaches. How does he teach? He teaches with very specific, clear instructions. They then drill those techniques. Then they do positional sparring.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, if John Danaher was doing solely ecological teaching, you'd have to take pause, because you'd be like, well, something's going on here.
Yes.
This guy it's not a fluke. It's not like he's just had one competent athlete come out. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, you'd take pause and go, well, he was GSP's coach, Gordon Ryan, you know, the original Death Squad. Yeah. You know, like all these guys who are now B team or whatever, like, you know, you'd have to stop and go, oh, fucking something's going on here.
Right.
But yeah, like if you, this idea of making, like trimming back all the fat and making it easier or simpler, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. Like jiu-jitsu is incredibly complicated. And I mean, let's throw a fucking analogy in there, bro. Right. Like, for example, when you're looking at the elite level, right, the tiniest details make a big difference.
Yep.
Okay. The same reason that if, you know, at the not elite level, if you got in your car and I got in my car and we went for a race around a racetrack, even though your car's like faster than mine, like it would probably be negligible. It would just be like,
I'd smoke you, bro.
But when you look at, you know, Formula One, I mean, 1/100th of a second makes a difference.
Yep.
A part on the car being 5 grams lighter or heavier makes a difference because at the elite level, the tiniest minute detail makes a difference. So trying to like strip it back and make everything simpler and take away all these minute details, it's kind of neglecting the fact that we currently stand where we do in jiu-jitsu because we're standing on the shoulders of these giants who have developed all these complicated details and techniques. Like
and counters, and then a new wave of movements comes out, and then a counter comes out, and then things go in and out of fashion based on trends. And
So before we just continue to dump on it, let's just dial it back and go, well, what are some of the positives to this approach of teaching? So, I mean, it's a great tool to teach like brand new beginners to some degree. I mean, you don't necessarily want to throw a brand new beginner into not live rolling, but even specific rolling because, you know, without some level of understanding, they can easily hurt themselves or hurt someone else. But, you know, it's a great way to teach beginners who can't grasp really complicated, minute details of, you know, of Lucas Lepre's knee cut and all the little things that are going on that make Lucas Lepre's knee cut work against other world champion black belts. It doesn't work just because Lepre has some crazy fundamental understanding of the concepts and mechanics of a knee cut. Yeah, he has that. And then a million minute details built on top of it, right? The fundamental mechanics and concepts of understanding a position aren't enough, right? So it's a great way to teach people who aren't yet ready to grasp that information. It is also why it is the exact fucking way a kid's jiu-jitsu class is taught because kids can't follow steps. Well, they can, but as a whole, I mean, for example, this is how I teach a double leg to kids. So simple. And I'm talking kids, we start from 4 years old, right? This is how we teach a double leg to kids. You go, okay, you stand in front of them. 3 steps. Down onto your knees, hug their knees, push them over. So simple. They can't, like a lot of kids can't do it. Like they just, they can't remember those steps, you know, like they hug and then, you know, as they push, they let go. So the person just steps back, like they go on their knees, but they're still 2 meters away from the kid in front of them. Like, you know, so it's why, so then, okay, how can I teach a kid who can't follow these steps? Well, we play games, right? We have a game that we play called Hunter. This is a kid's game we play where it's essentially like playing tips or tag. And how it works, and anyone listening who runs kids classes, and if you haven't heard of this game,
they freaking love this game.
They love it.
The kids go batshit whenever, because I was helping teach some kids classes. Whenever Aaron would say Hunter, the kids would just explode.
Yeah, they love it, right? Yeah. And you might have already played this game in your gym. If any instructors are listening, it might just be called something else. If you haven't heard of this game, great little game for the kids, which is it's essentially like tag. You have one person in the middle, the hunter. And the hunter's only allowed to move around on their hands and knees, right? And what they have to do is catch the other kids, but unlike tips or tag where you just have to tag them, you have to tackle them and make them fall over, essentially doing a double leg, right? And then if that person falls over, they're not out. They then become a hunter, right? So as the game progresses, you go from 1 hunter to 2 to 3, and then everyone else running around are the survivors, right? And so you teach them through a game how to do a double leg, right? We teach arm drags essentially to kids with a game where they each have a peg on the back of their shirt or the back of their gi. And the idea is you've got to get behind the person to steal the peg. So we do this to kids. Why? Because kids can't grasp complicated steps and techniques and whatever, right? But adults can. Hey, of course, a week 1 white belt can't grasp a fucking bearing bowler and whatever. But you know what I mean.
Get them to play hunter.
No, that's right as well, right? Yeah. Exactly. But you do still sometimes do games in adults class.
Yep.
Think about the wrestling game that I don't know what wrestlers call it, but we just call it like leg tag, right? That wrestling game where you're essentially just trying to tag each other's legs. And if you get tagged, you got to do a burpee, right? Like you're learning grip fighting and, being able to penetrate the legs and whatever, but in a safer environment, penetrate, right? So even then there's some level of games, right? Ecological teaching is done. It's called specific training, right?
Yeah.
But your whole entire teaching to think that all these techniques are going to organically manifest I think with these minute details.
To play counter argument, to play devil's advocate, what they would say is, yes, they set up these games, but then they give like direction. So essentially they're teaching technique within it, but they're not calling it technique.
Yes, agreed. They say something like, they don't teach a triangle. They teach the mechanics of double strangulation or whatever that's called. John Danaher uses this term as well, right? And then they'll give a target of like, okay, your objective is to get to a position where you've got one leg over their shoulder, the other leg under their armpit, and your feet crossed, and your ankle locked behind your knee or something. So they won't
get to a fucking triangle.
Yeah, right. And then they'll understand the mechanics. Yeah, or I could just teach you one of multiple steps of how to get there.
Yeah.
Or, I've said this before. Why are guys like the Rotolo brothers so good so young when they have a decade less mat time than 30-year-old current? Like, I don't mean old people, not old, but I don't mean like why are the Rotolo brothers beating Shanji Hibera or whoever? It's like, they're at the end of their career or whatever, so you got a 19-year-old versus a 40-year-old. That makes a difference. But why are they beating 28, 29, 30 or guys in their young 30s who are still in their physical prime? Well, these guys have a fundamental understanding of like the concepts and mechanics of positions, which sounds like I'm advocating for this approach, but it's the details on top of that. Mm-hmm. And so these guys doing these YouTube rounds or whatever, preaching this, man, you haven't invented teaching concepts in the mechanics to students. Like, like stop just trying to sell something that we all already do.
This reminds me of these type of people that they read one self-help book and then that book becomes their personality for like the next 3 months until they read the next one.
Yeah,
and then that
right.
book becomes their personality. I'm not saying that's the case, but what I'm saying is that obviously Robert Gray has put together an amazing, well-researched, scientifically backed, conceptual way of learning and has put that in an awesome book, right? People have got their hands on it, and some people are really drinking from the Kool-Aid. They think that this is the be-all, end-all of everything. And like you're pointing out, they're using it as a marketing tool to be the flagship or the flag bearer, if you will, for the ecological approach in jiu-jitsu. It's like, I'm going to bring this to jiu-jitsu and I'm going to run my entire school with this approach. But what we're counter-arguing is that is throwing out, like you pointed out, standing on the shoulder of giants.
Yeah.
We've developed decades or hundreds of years or 100 years of BJJ. Why would you throw that out for the latest trend? Why not adopt that trend into your training? And 50% of your rolling can be, or your drilling or whatever, could be the ecological approach, and you're still getting all the benefit from it.
Yeah. Like, I just think, like you said, like all these details or all the work that these other people have done for us to get where we are today, there is no way that an ecological teaching approach is going to get someone like organically manifesting a Mikey Musameshi bolo crab ride techniques. There's no way. Oh, but how did Mikey get to figuring it out? Well, like, firstly, he's like one in a million.
Yeah.
He's pretty much a savant. But it's also because he was taught a whole bunch of technical knowledge to get to all these, or jiu-jitsu is just way too dynamic and complicated for such a vague approach.
Yeah.
Right. And it's very, if you listen to some of these guys talk about it, they're very articulate and very intelligent, but they really just kind of sound like a used car salesman. They're very confident and they kind of
have the buzzwords.
Yeah, have the buzzwords, or it sounds like talking to a politician. You ask a question, they never really answer it, but somehow like
it's
answer
satisfied,
it. Satisfies your question in the sense that you don't have a follow-up question or a rebuttal, but they never act. Yeah, you're more confused than when you went in. Or when you speak to an actual jiu-jitsu intellectual like Keenan Cornelius or Mikey Musameshi or John Danaher, and you understand the depth of understanding they have, like very difficult to fault someone, like very easy to pull someone up on their lack of technical knowledge, but very difficult to pull someone up on their lack of understanding of a concept. So it's very safe to hide behind like this conceptual teaching and whatever, because to be able to teach the minute details, you have to understand the mechanics and the fundamentals of, the conceptual workings of a position or a technique.
And there's a big difference. And this is something that we spoke about this yesterday off air. There's a big difference between being able to do a technique in a live roll or even in a competition and understanding it to the level where you can explain why certain things are done in the technique.
Yeah. And I've always used the parallel between, just learning jiu-jitsu and being good at it just because you've done it and language. So I always say, for me, I've always had the goal of, with my jiu-jitsu, being the opposite to my language is in English. So, I'm fluent in English because I grew up in an English speaking country. But if you ask me, why is this sentence structured this way? Why is this word spelt this way? Why does the verb go here and the pronoun here, blah, blah, blah? I'll be like, I don't fucking know. It just does, right? Because I've just natively grown up speaking it.
Yep.
But I want my jiu-jitsu to be like, no, the sentence is structured like this because this and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I taught English for a little bit while I lived in Brazil because it's very easy work for a foreigner to get. And I did have to restudy a whole bunch of English that I've since forgotten. But I mean, the owners of the school who were Brazilian, their English was better than mine, like in terms of grammatically and understanding.
They could explain it better,
the
right?
Actual language, like way better than mine.
Because they learned it as
that's right, and I've always wanted my jiu-jitsu to be like that. I've always wanted to understand the grammar of jiu-jitsu.
I have a really good example of where this played out recently. This happened yesterday. I'm not going to name any names or throw anyone under the bus or anything.
No, Chad.
No, it wasn't Chad. It was another blue belt. And so the day prior, so today we're recording this on a Wednesday. On Monday night, we learned a technique in gi. On Tuesday, I was doing some no-gi rolls with the person that was at both classes, and they were trying that technique, but in no-gi. And after the roll, they're like, why wasn't this working? It was frustrating me. But because I spent the time Monday night picking your brain and fully understanding not only the details of the position, exactly why certain grips are important, but also a conceptual knowledge of the mechanics of the pass. It was a guard pass, the mechanics of the guard pass and why each grip is doing what and why they are important. I could quickly identify and tell this person why it doesn't work in no-gi just by saying, hey, you were unable to control the bottom shoulder. The leg weave pass is not going to work like this in no-gi because I'm posturing out, which I did. Therefore, you cannot pass that way. And they're like, oh, okay. So that is an example on not only in one way, you'd be like, oh, I don't know why it didn't work. It must be just a gi thing and not really know any more than that. And because I explained it, it seems simple. But if you don't have that knowledge, it wouldn't be simple.
Yeah, and I don't get me wrong, I understand the argument and to some degree I'm for the argument of, oh, well, if I just give you the answer, you'll never learn, right? That's also part of the backbone of what this teaching style is built on, which is that if people figure it out themselves, they learn better, and they
learn the why.
And it's ingrained. And it's like, yes, I get that, but it's also, there's other factors to consider. One, just the complexity of jiu-jitsu, right? That it's, you can have positions that fucking, I don't know, let's say like, Mikey Musumeci would need to ask Gordon Ryan, why are you doing this? Like, you have like one of the biggest intellectuals in the sport. There would still be stuff. Jiu-jitsu is way too complicated. No one knows everything, right? So there's still positions that the current best dudes in the world would ask someone else what, like they wouldn't be able to figure it out. I know that for a fact. There's for sure no one knows everything. No one can solve everything, right? And then there's other factors as well, right? Well, it's a physical sport, and safeties, like, I mean, they'll learn more if they figure it out. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you definitely learn that that's the wrong thing to do if you tear your ACL. That's going to, you'll never forget that lesson because it cost you an ACL. Take the
example of you and Sonny Brown, right? Where you learnt through conceptual jiu-jitsu, right? That doing
how shit a calf
crushes.
So I get that argument that, if I give you the answer, you'll never learn. But like, that's understating the complexity and the safety side of jiu-jitsu, right? Like, you'll sure learn that you need to jump much higher than that when you jump close guard, because see how you broke that guy's knee in half?
Yeah. You'll definitely learn the wrong way to roll out of a heel hook.
Yeah, that's right. Like, and imagine trying to teach a heel hook without teaching a heel hook, because you don't teach techniques. All right, guys, you're going to start in this position, 50-50, but you don't call it 50-50 because you don't give names to anything.
Start with their leg over your hip.
All right,
and your
guys,
leg
so you're
over
going to
their
start
hip.
essentially like you're scissoring, and then the objective is for you to not lose their knee line and rotate their ankle till they tap, right? I mean, how many ligaments are you going to lose before a correctly, safely applied heel hooks organically manifests itself? That's fucking retarded, bro.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just, again, if I go back to what I said at the start, and by start, I mean minute 20 of this episode, right? I said ecological teaching is essentially just specific training. We already do it, right? Yep. Like, so, but ecological teaching as in, we don't teach technique, and like, it's just stupid. There are a million more cons to it than there are pros.
I think that,
and the pros are good pros, right? The pros for that approach are good, right? But the cons are just far too many.
If we could summarize it and say, this is like, I think we have the same stance. Like, well, I have your stance.
You better.
You better. You want that stripe, boy. Anyway, so I think if we were to summarize it, we would say that ecological teaching concepts have a place in jiu-jitsu. You could argue, like we've already pointed out, that they've been done for years in the form of specific training, but you could even take it a step further and do specific games, specific concepts, whatever. It has a place, it has value. However, to do it in isolation is a mistake. There's a reason that the best guys in the world, the best coaches in the world, do not do this in isolation.
It's right.
Because it is not the most effective way. It is a very valuable tool, but to do it in isolation seems more like a gimmick and a trend for marketing purposes to whatever than it is for actually benefit the student the most.
Yeah, that's what I believe. And I mean, I've listened to guys talk about it.
Yeah.
And they're explaining their teaching approach to other black belt instructors who, after an hour, the other instructor's still like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like I said, I personally would lose an argument with these people. So I'm not good at debating, and the people I've listened to talk about this are, like
excellent
I said,
speakers.
Great
very
speakers, very intelligent, very articulate, and I would lose that conversation. But like I said, no questions would just be answered with, I would be more confused. It just doesn't make any sense.
But do you think it's because these people are so, they're very well read, they're well researched, they understand what they're talking about in terms of ecological teaching. They've read the papers, they've read the book, they've blah, 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 right? They've even adopted it in their own schools. But maybe you could say that for them, maybe that is the best way to learn for them, as individuals. But to apply that to the general population, to the everyday person, to someone that walks in off the street.
Well, then that's also just the sign of a bad coach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone I forget there's like the 3 ways of learning. I mean,
yeah, that is a little bit of a myth, but yes.
you know, right? Like some people are more, you know, prefer to read
tactile learners, visual learners, right. Auditory learners.
But, you know, either way, people learn differently in slightly different ways. So, you know, I try to, as a coach, cater to each individual student that suits their needs the best. So, which isn't necessarily the way that works the best for me, right? Yeah. I try to do it the way that works the best for them. So this like vague stripping it back to its bare bones, like it's not like it's become some like like jiu-jitsu is very complicated, but it's not like it's become overcomplicated and there's all this mess that doesn't need to be there if you just understand XYZ. No, man, it's like you need to understand XYZ. You need to understand the mechanics and the concepts. But like you said with the leg weave pass, you were like, well, if I understand like these tiny little details against someone my level, that can make or break the technique not working.
Exactly.
You know, or working depending on whether you're attacking or defending or whatever. And you know, so this vague approach and ripping
just
back,
figure it out.
Just figure it out.
Obviously, they would counter, and I can almost sense someone screaming through their like, headphones right now, like yelling at us. Yeah, but the coach is there to guide the concept, so they figure it out, but the coach is there to point them in the right direction. And I've heard this argument being made, like, take for example, if you have a game where the objective is to armbar or whatever the fuck.
How long do I have to guide you until I'm essentially just teaching you how to do it?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, you know, I'm going to be forever guiding you, and the guidance will just become more focused, which is essentially what? Getting to like finer and finer point details. I may as well just teach you the fucking technique.
Yeah. It's reverse engineering our original method, right?
It just doesn't make any sense. I'd love to hear if people are listening, being like,
you got something wrong, or whatever.
Yeah, but I just think you can give me your 10 positive counter arguments, and I'm going to have 100 rebuttals, because it's just, as a sole teaching practice, has no place in my opinion.
But as a tool, to be used as a
tool,
good
gyms already do it, bro. It's specific training. Stop just, it's no different to me, it being a pet peeve of mine of someone, being like, oh, tarantula guard. It's fucking spider guard, bro. You just changed one grip. Renaming all these things just for clickbait and for money and whatever. It's just fucking stupid, bro. And I feel like that's what this is. There's going to be people.
You know what? You're just a hater. You're just a hater, Adam. I'm
looking forward to that instructional that comes out about ecological teaching for jiu-jitsu that is just going
what
on
I would
about
like to know,
vague games. And
now this is not going to like automatically, cancel out what these people are saying, because there's not just one. There's a few people that have taken this up and run with it. If they do have products that they're selling around this concept, if hypothetically, I'm not saying they are. I don't know. I'm not well enough read in this. I haven't done my homework. But say, for example, if these guys did have a course they were selling, I would be not automatically dismissing what they're saying, but being aware of that. You need to be aware of that when you're listening to their arguments. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, if obviously, I guess that goes with anything though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If someone has any sort of financial interest in their agenda,
in their information. But then I'm thinking about it as well. I put out a lot of free information on strength and conditioning, mobility, nutrition, all that sort of stuff. And I do sell products associated with that.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to put myself through that filter. I was like, oh, okay, well, if I'm telling people, I'm not going to say like, don't listen to people that are selling you something. But whenever you're listening to my advice, you should be aware that I also sell, but I'm not getting money from the advice. I don't know. I'm talking myself into circles now. I'm like try not to shoot myself in the dick, but I kind of am.
Yeah, but you're also not selling a controversial reinventing the wheel product.
No. Yeah, you're right. So
you're also not there being like,
buy this supplement and it's going to improve your jiu-jitsu. Yeah, the jiu-jitsu supplement. It has creatine in it.
Yeah.
Buy it. It'll make you good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I should start that.
Or it's not like you're there being like, you've been lifting wrong your whole life. You're supposed to lift until you feel your shoulder dislocate, blah, 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 or whatever, or I just find it frustrating. I think it's just, I'm all for people wanting to, if they are selling products, I don't know if there are instructionals on this teaching method or whatever.
Yeah, I kind of rabbit hole a bit.
But, I'm all for people
making money
and whatever, but
providing value, because it's not
keep some
just
get some morals, bro.
Yeah,
some ethics up in you, and
get some of them ethics up, yeah.
I find it quite frustrating. I mean, I had more. I mean, I don't know. I just have so many cons to why this is the correct way to teach. It just just doesn't make any sense to me.
But now everyone knows what Adam thinks about ecological teaching.
But what does Joe Rogan think about? I mean, we're pretty much the same guy.
You are, so I could say that he would have the same opinion as you, or maybe you would have the same opinion as him. I don't know what came first, chicken or the egg. Probably the chicken, and Joe Rogan's the chicken. You're the egg.
Oh, man, I came out of his butt.
It was better than coming in his butt.
Shit. You had to phrase it like that, didn't you? Yeah.
Good place to end it.
Yeah. I don't know, guys. I mean, look, I am very interested if people have read Rob Gray's book. Also, remember, it wasn't applied to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's just sport in general.
Yeah. I mean, well, the other thing I'd said to you off air, was talking about chess. And I think most people know by now, if you're listening to this, that colloquially in Brazil, or at least around, jiu-jitsu is referred to as a physical game of chess. Mm-hmm. And it really is, or the way I explain it to some people, I often say it's like playing chess, but you can move each other's pieces sort of thing. It's physical chess. And imagine just trying to teach someone chess through games and concepts. You're someone who knows how to play chess, right? And I'm someone who, you could imagine me, you take me as the person who, all I know is the ways the pieces are allowed to move.
Yep.
Short of I can't remember the rules in terms of swapping the king
castling,
and the castling. I can't remember the exact intent. But anyway, I know the basic ways.
Castling, en passant, you know how the pieces move, you know what's a legal move, etc.
Yeah, all that,
checkmate. Yeah.
So I know essentially the first 5 things you read in the rule book of chess, right? But that's it. Could you take me from where I am today and make me a better chess player by just teaching me some fundamental games and stuff of controlling the board and forking and things like that?
Yeah,
yes, of course. But at what point would I plateau and hit a wall when it's no, man, you need to learn you need to actually learn and memorize
openings
and
probably 1,500,
all these sort of things, because if you don't memorize these step-by-step details, you're just going to get creamed by the people who do know these
I'd say
details.
1,500 Elo. You could probably get to...
Dial it back to the piece. So I'm the dude who only knows what the pieces do.
I'd say the equivalent of maybe blue belt.
Right? Before I need to actually start learning
you get to
specific...
high-level blue belt, low level, high-level blue belt, mid-level purple belt level.
And then you need to learn intricate,
then you
100-step movements, because
at least
whatever,
20, up to 20. But yes, you need to then memorize openings, opening traps, etc. So conceptual chess will get you a long way, but not really. You need opening theory.
And I mean, jiu-jitsu is like that, but physical. Right?
FYI, my highest rating is 1,100, so I'm not even up to 1,500 yet. So I'm like a white belt.
You fucking dog shit, bro.
Yeah, but funnily enough, that's how they taught. So there's 2 chess engines, the 2 best chess engines in the world, Stockfish and AlphaZero. You've probably heard of AlphaZero and AlphaGo, because that's the revolutionary AI. Okay, well, that's the big AI that is really, really good at chess. The best AI out of the 2 is AlphaZero. The reason that it's better than Stockfish, because the way they made Stockfish is they input a library of openings and games, taught the engine the games, the past history of chess, every single game ever or whatever, and then got it to use AI learning to figure out the rest. Mm-hmm. But it had a base. However, what they did with AlphaZero is they didn't do that at all. They just, like you said, gave the engine the rules, so it knew how the pieces moved and knew all the rules like checkmate, etc. It knew the objective. And then they just let it play like millions and millions and millions of games against itself until it figured it out. And lo and behold, who ended up winning, spoiler alert, AlphaZero beat Stockfish.
Which was essentially the conceptual learning one,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. But so that sounds like it's arguing for
but
but you can't.
It figured out all the openings itself. It figured out the best openings in the world and the best responses to the openings that humans figured out like 100 years before. It already figured them out, most of them anyway, by itself.
But how? I'll tell you how.
Millions of games.
That's right. Because it could. Because within the course of like 3 months within the course of 3 months, that chess engine was able to play what would take you 20 million lifetimes of games to play. Like you as a human being,
you cannot do that.
You can't learn the same way an AI learns.
No.
Like, because so the argument is ridiculous.
You put it brilliantly. You would have to live a million lifetimes.
Yeah. Right. And you'd have to play chess 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, non-stop. That's all you'd have to do. Yeah. And you'd have to, live to 100 a million times over. Yeah. And then you're up to where the AI was after 3 months. Exactly. It's the same way like there was a, Dota 2, right? Like I think it was Elon Musk's AI, beat one of the best Dota 2 players at mid. I'm getting a bit off topic. I don't want to go into how this video game works, but long story short, a human player versus a video game player, and the AI won. But it's because AI can do what humans can't in terms of multiple.
Yeah, and if you don't know what Dota 2 is, it's a shittier version of League of Legends. So just
legal. Yeah, hang on. For any video game players out there, let's say League of Legends. Well, Dota 2 would be like, Warzone, and League of Legends would be like Fortnite. That's very accurate.
Yeah, it kind of is though. It kind of is. I was going to rebuttal, but you're like,
he's got me.
He's got a fucking good point. He's got a really good point. Anyway,
guys, look, we'll leave it there. Honestly, if people do have rebuttals, or maybe it's how your gym teaches, or just thoughts you'd like to share,
or challenges,
right? Spoiler alert, we get the last word. So no, but honestly, I would love to hear if people, think we're wrong, or what you think about this, if you've experienced it, whatever. And
to do so, submit a question.
Yep, that's right. Linktree in our Instagram as well as in the description and everything, right? You can submit the audio question or message us on Instagram, whatever. Be interested to hear from you. Guys, next week, hopefully we have an episode we had planned today that we had to put on the back burner. Hopefully we get to record that one next week, but you'll know. You'll know next week.
Or you won't know. Who knows?
Yeah, that's right.
You probably will never know.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to episode 131, 20-minute rant followed by ecological teaching. We will catch you next time.